Hi everyone, this is Milika Ormiston, and I hope you're all well. I'm very happy we're able to connect today. I'm joined with Marcus Aurelius Anderson. He'll be talking out to us about topics that are especially timely during these very challenging times: resilience, adversity, and adaptability. What are the key ingredients needed for mental resilience? Marcus will shortly share his incredible story and advice. Thank you for joining us, Marcus.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. Thank you all for being here. I like the fact that you self-selected to be a part of this. If you're here and you're listening right now, this message is for you. This is a message that can help you, that can help other people. And just like everything else, you guys have been to college, you're alumni now, so you understand. If you listen to this and if you take notes and if you actually digest this and you let it come in, you can do a lot with it. But if you're on your phone, if you're distracted, if you're trying to multitask, the material is only as good as the person that uses it. So wisdom that is absorbed but not used is the equivalent of ignorance. So I hope this is something that will be pragmatic and help you get to the next place and help you get through whatever adversity you're going through and be stronger on the other side. Now this is, Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was listening to you, Marcus, and thank you so much. I was just going to share a quick bit about housekeeping, but yeah, I think that, so I don't want to interrupt because it's so well said, and I couldn't have said it better. So I really appreciate it. So do please pay attention. Put your phones away. I know this is just 1 hour that you have of your time. I promise you this is worth it, and I'm going to pass it on to Marcus very quickly. I just wanted to let you know that there will be time for questions at the end of the webinar. So please click the Ask a Question button below the video to ask your questions throughout. To let you know that there is a link to Marcus's book, The Gift of Adversity, Overcoming Paralysis and Pain, to find his TEDx talk and podcast. You will find them in the resources section. And just a few words, Marcus Aurelius Anderson is a best-selling author, TEDx speaker, national keynote speaker. He's a mindset coach to companies, leaders, entrepreneurs, and a host to the very successful podcast, Conscious Millionaire, Epic Achiever. And these days, Marcus speaks, writes, and coaches to overcome their own adversities and actualize their personal definition of success and fulfillment. So thank you so much again, Marcus, and I'll let you take it away from here.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being gracious and allowing me to talk for a second. I didn't mean to get out in front of anything there. So, but yeah, we're going to be off and running. Finding the gift of adversity in times of uncertainty. So this material is normally a 3-day workshop, and it's normally done for big groups. So what I've done is I'm trying to take about 15 hours of material and just compress it into 45 minutes of meat that you can take as much from it as you so desire. And again, it's in the application that you put with it. So about me, again, a TEDx speaker, international keynote speaker, best-selling author of The Gift of Adversity. My podcast is called Epic Achiever. I have another podcast that will be coming out soon. It'll be called Acta Non Verba, which means deeds, not words. During that podcast, by the way, I interview some of the top performers, Navy SEALs, professional athletes, Olympic athletes, top entrepreneurs that are at the very top of their game. And in each of those people that I've ever found, they always have some sort of adversity that they've gone through, some sort of hardship. So Ed Milet, for example, he's a top entrepreneur. He's one of the co-creators of Arete. He had an alcoholic father. There was a lot of abuse there, and he chose to see that adversity as opportunity and level up from it. And now, because he was able to get stronger from that, for example, now he and his father are much closer, and the opportunities that he's been able to find are fantastic. Leadership and mental resilience coach, leaders, CEOs, entrepreneurs, companies, universities, organizations. I was in the infantry. I was preparing to deploy when I got injured, and I'll talk a little bit about that. I've also done martial arts my entire life. So these philosophies are not just philosophical ideals. These are truths that I live my life by. And I've taught millions of people through events, online training, podcast episodes, mindset and resilience. The sources, as she mentioned before, the book, The Gift of Adversity, Overcoming Paralysis, Pain to Find Purpose, and also for my TEDx talk, The Gift of Adversity. Again, you can find those. You can just find those. You can find the book on Amazon. It's easy. And if you YouTube The Gift of Adversity, I'll be the first thing that comes up. The other thing I want to point out is that every single person here will go through adversity at some point in their life. And if you're not going through it right now, it will be here. but you don't have to be afraid of it. My goal is to give you the tools so that you can see adversity for what it is, look it in the eye and say, you know what? I see you, and I'm not afraid of you. And I'm going to keep moving forward. And that's the goal. So in 2012, while I was preparing to deploy with the US Army, I suffered a severe spinal injury that left me paralyzed. I ruptured a disc in my neck that paralyzed me from the neck down. They rushed me to the hospital, and when they got there, they operated on me immediately. I died on the operating table twice during the operation. And when I woke up in the ICU, the doctor said, the good news is you get to live to tell the tale. The bad news is this is what you're left with for the rest of your life. So a person's 40th birthday is a big milestone for most people. At that point in their life, they have everything figured out. They're married, they have a family, they have an incredible job, they're retiring, or they're thinking about retiring. At least that's what I thought life should be at that point. But in this life, there's what we hope will happen, there's what we fear will happen, and then there's what actually happens. For me, my 40th birthday was a huge milestone as well, but not for the reasons that I just mentioned. Because for me, I turned 40 years old, broke, divorced, bedridden, and paralyzed, trying to figure out what do I do with my life. And that's where I was able to start learning to find an opportunity in adversity. The very first thing that you have to do if you're going through something is to accept your adversity. And for many of us, this is the hardest part. You've got to identify, recognize, and acknowledge the adversity, because if you do not do that, it will continue to be a hindrance. It will continue to be a stumbling block. It will become so cumbersome that you can't even live your life around it. So turning a blind eye makes you feel stuck. It makes you feel disempowered. And that's not a position that I want anybody to be in. For me, the very first thing that happened when I was injured was I was in disbelief. I was completely oblivious to how bad this was. The doctors, in my mind, here's what I heard. They told me that I had died on the table twice. And I was like, well, if I died twice, then I can overcome this whole being paralyzed thing, right? I thought it was only temporary. So denial was very real for me. I stayed in denial thinking that, well, that morning I can't walk or move, but by tonight I'll be okay. And then the next day, and the next day. After a week of being in the ICU and not being able to walk and then being taken back to my unit, that's when the reality started to kick in for me. The Kubler-Ross grief cycle, I think we've all heard if you've taken any psychology course. It's this cycle where we go through these ideas. We go through shock, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, and problem solving. And when we look on it on a line like this, it looks very simple. It's very easy. It's like, yeah, that's what happens. But when you were in it, when you're facing it, it's very different. It's very hard to be able to have this sort of objectivity when your entire life, for me, everything that was important in my life had been taken from me. I was literally one of the most elite soldiers that you could be, preparing to deploy to go defend his country in Afghanistan with the most deployed unit in the history of the military at that time. I went from being up there and leading a team to not even being able to take care of myself. I couldn't even change my own bedpan. So that was a big shock to the system, and that was a big blow to my ego. I went through a lot of anger. We talk about shock and denial, but anger was the thing that I stayed a lot of time with, and that's the hardest part. People will say things like, well, this person has gone through something difficult. Maybe they have a loss of a loved one. Maybe they've lost their job. Maybe they're in a divorce. Maybe they lost a child. Maybe they just feel horrible about a situation that happened to them. And I've had people ask me, well, shouldn't it just take a certain amount of time for each person? Shouldn't it be like 3 to 6 months and they get over this? The reality is, to really get over something like this, it takes as much time as it takes, because it depends on the person. If you're a person who is already sort of healthy and you don't have a lot of emotional baggage, which we all know that that's not true. We all have our own emotional baggage in some way, shape, or form. But if you're a person who has not as much baggage as maybe somebody else, you may think that you can get through things faster than if you were from a person who was maybe addicted or abused or what have you. But the reality is, it comes down to what unfinished business you don't have taken care of yet. So all of this for everybody, it takes time and it's a process. And like all processes, it's a cycle, and we will relapse. The idea is that we will move forward a few steps and then falling back. This becomes a coping mechanism. This creates loops within loops and cycles within cycles. So what I mean by that is, for me, I was in denial, and then I was in anger for a long, long time. I was furious at everyone around me, but the person that I was the most mad about was myself and my actions. I was projecting all of my anger and frustration onto other people, the people that came in that were trying to take care of me. But I was the most mad at myself because I realized that I had all this time, all this opportunity, all these chances, and I'd wasted them. I had so much time, talent, potential because I assumed that I would always have the time, talent, and potential to do whatever it was that I wanted to do. The more I thought about it, the more angry I would become. I thought about all the other times when I had asked lesser of myself because I thought, oh, there's always tomorrow, I'll just do it then. And for what? So I could binge on Netflix or Amazon? So I could catch a nap? The reality of my injury was sobering and I felt like a statistic. Soon this anger that I had was directed inwards, and that's the very definition of depression. Those became my darkest days, and I can tell you all here that I honestly wanted nothing more than to die. I wanted to commit suicide. But I couldn't even commit suicide in my physical condition. And that's why it was so difficult for me, because the one decision that I was trying to make, I couldn't even act on. So for me, there was this loop of anger, depression, and then I never got beyond the depression. I would go back to anger, and then depression, and then beginning from some of that bargaining, and then back to depression, and then back to anger. We relapse because the adversity that we feel is painful, but it's familiar. And for most of us, if you notice the times that you hesitate in your life, you will stay in a situation where it's painful, but it's a familiar pain, and you would rather have the familiarity of that pain than the uncertainty of the future, even though the future may hold incredible things for you. So just staying in place, just being stuck, just feeling disempowered, that's where I was. I was the very definition of that. Familiarity is soothing. Unfortunately, we allow familiarity to become what we think is preference, just because we are used to it. And that's what we're going to talk about today. I don't want any of you guys to compromise or allow any sort of familiarity to stop you from moving forward. This helped us understand that adversity is not a competition. And I say that because how many people here have done this, because I've done it, or we know people, where you have somebody and they say, oh, you know, I had a bad day, and they're saying this. You know, the traffic was bad, my job was bad, blah, 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 blah. And then there's the one person that pipes up, oh yeah, your day was bad? Well, let me tell you about my day. And then they just want to try to go off, and it's this competition. They want to try to one-up you on their adversity. But that's not what it's about. That's not what's going on. The people that are talking like that all the time, those are the people that are kind of stuck in that place. They're stuck in that victim mentality. They're choosing not to act. The definition of anxiety is choosing not to choose, and that's exactly what they're doing. These are the people that hate Monday, love Friday, and they love telling everybody on social media about it. So if that's you and you see yourself doing that, if you get yourself in that loop, stop for a second and step back and take a good hard look at it. The insights that this can potentially breed for all of us, knowing that adversity is inevitable and that it's universal for everybody, is that it can give opportunity to breed empathy and compassion. And what I mean by that is this. If you've ever fallen down, and I mean metaphorically or physically, if you've fallen down, you know what it feels like to be down there. And it sucks. If somebody happened to help you up at that place when you're at your lowest point, you will never forget that person. And here's where it comes to the other side. Here's where the empathy and the compassion comes into play. Now, if you see somebody else fall, you remember, I was there. I remember what that felt like. That's the empathy. And the compassion is the thing that compels you to help them up, because guess what? Somebody helped you up. And you remember how incredible it felt to have that ability. The idea that somebody would stop what they're doing to help you get up in the time of your most need, that's what compassion and empathy are. So if you overcome adversity and if you learn the lesson from it, your compassion and your empathy will increase exponentially. And so will your gratitude, but we'll get into that later. Now, we all have our own adversity scale, and that's why I'm saying that adversity is not a competition. We are all going through battles that nobody else knows about. So just understand that we are all going through hardship, and if you can do that, that will keep you honest. Now, this adversity scale that I'm talking about is, and if you're taking notes, you can write this down on a piece of paper, it's easy. At the very top of it, you looked at the 10, that's the greatest hardship you've ever experienced in your life. At 0 is zero hardship or heaven on earth, however you want to look at it. So 10 is the worst, 0 is the best. So for me, I always look at what is the greatest hardship I've ever experienced. So for me, that was being paralyzed and dying on the table twice. What happens now is I have this as a perspective. This helps me step back and be objective about what's going on. So if I'm having a bad day or if I didn't get a lot of sleep and I'm aggravated, I look at this and I sit down and I can put it on a napkin or whatever it is, make a map and say, okay, on the adversity scale, truly, where is this hardship? Compared to the worst thing I've ever gone through, where is this? Usually it's about a 2 or a 3. And for those of you that right now, whatever you're going through, maybe in this moment is the greatest adversity you've ever been through, I want you to understand that this is your opportunity to get stronger from it. And we'll go through some of the tools to do that. But understand that whatever adversity you're going through, you can get through it, you can learn from it. And frankly, just trying to deny it is what makes it harder for you to move forward. And again, that's why we're going through this step by step. And a lot of people that will say, well, why can't I just ignore adversity? And I think we've all either done this or we've seen people that are doing it, because I lived my life ignoring adversity for a long time. Before I was 40, I was going through a lot of the motions. I was doing just enough to get by. I was settling. I was compromising in what I was doing because I was doing what everybody else was doing around me. And frankly, just with natural talent or a little bit of work ethic, I was able to do better in my mind than some of these people around me, whether it be making more money or having a better job or whatever it was. But that's not what it was about. If you're making $100,000 and everyone around you is making $50,000 and you think, oh, I'm making more than all the people around me, but your potential is to be able to make $1 million, you're barely scratching the surface. And the reality is adversity is the catalyst that will force us to move forward if we're willing to do that. If we don't acknowledge it, eventually accept our adversity, we will never overcome it, and we risk falling into that victim mentality, which I talked about before. The victim mentality is disempowering. It creates an intoxicating illusion that nothing's within our control, so everything is out of our control. But when people get to this place, they say, well, nothing's in my control, vicariously, therefore, nothing's my fault, nothing's my responsibility. And this sets us up. This sets us up to be victimized over and over and over again. This gives us very thick skin, very thin skin. This makes us feel like everything is something that is dangerous. Everything is a threat because we don't have any resilience. And I know this mentality well because when I was lying in that bed for that long, that's exactly how I felt. I was a victim. I felt like I was owed something. And none of us are owed anything in this life. These are immediate action items. So these are the things that you put down. These are the things that you write down. These are the questions that you put in. So if you're writing something down right now, identify your adversity, whether it be an adversity in the past that you haven't gotten through to finish the loop, or whether it be an adversity you're going through right now, and identify the stage of grief that you are currently in the Kubler-Ross, the 5 stages. Are you still in denial? Are you in anger? Are you in bargaining? Are you in depression? Are you eventually in acceptance? Or are you in a loop of one of those? The second thing, on the adversity scale, plot where your current hardships land. Truly land. Not by the emotion that you feel right now, but by objectively stepping back, take a third-person perspective and say, if somebody else was going through this, what would that really look like for them on the adversity scale? That gives us perspective, and that helps us immediately. And this is a hard one, and these are supposed to be difficult. Identify where you've been the victim, where you've had the victim mentality in the past or the present, and notice how this disempowered mentality affects the decisions that you make. Understand how it compromises your feelings of happiness, success, and fulfillment. Understand how it stifles your ability to grow, how it keeps you in this place, this docile existence. When I was lying in that bed, unable to move, I swore to myself that I ever had a second chance, that I would never settle, never hesitate, and never compromise on my life or my decisions again. And I had no idea what my life held before me, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't about to play a victim for the rest of my life. Misery loves company, but not as much as mediocrity. And I would not drink from the cup of mediocrity another day. That's it. You flip the switch. So how do you get past that? These are techniques that will help you disengage emotionally and grant immediate perspective. And that's how we get past it. For me, lying in that bed, I was left with two options. I could stay angry and play the victim for the rest of my life, or I could change my mindset and my perspective. And I chose the second thing. I chose to take my life back and take control. That's the second step. You have to own it so that you can take control. You have to be aware of what you genuinely can control and let go of the things that you cannot control. And I'm sure you've heard this before. But here's the caveat. For most of us, it's hard to be aware of which is which. Now for me, lying in a bed unable to move, there wasn't a lot I could control. And my mind was going crazy, as you can imagine. And I was angry, I was depressed, and I was pissed off at the world. The one thing that I could control was my breath. And if that sounds woo-woo for some of you people, I'm just going to ask you to go out and look at the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system, how deep breathing affects the relaxing part of our body, the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic is the fight or flight system. The parasympathetic is the rest and relaxation part. So by being in this place of anxiety, ridden, stricken, grief, anger, taking deep breaths, lying in my bed and just doing like a simple meditation of breath that allowed me to calm my mind a little bit. And from that place, now I can make better decisions. I can start asking myself some of the questions that would change my life. Once I was able to make that one decision and control one thing, I started to believe it more. I started believing there were maybe other things in my life that I could control. Maybe my belief system, maybe my mind, maybe the way I thought about stuff, maybe my conversation, maybe the words that I chose to use, not only with the people that I spoke to, but with the internal dialogue that I kept with myself. And this is where it's so important. So what can we really control? You can control your actions. You can control your attitude, your effort, habits, routines, setting and reinforcement of boundaries, your discipline, work ethic, how you show up for others and treat them. These are things that are all within our control. And even if we feel like we're being stimulated by something else that makes it out of our control, we can always decide what kind of work ethic we're going to apply, what the discipline is going to be, how we're going to act in that situation. We don't have to react. We are responsible. You are the one that's in control of how you act. It's the big one, things that are outside of your control, the weather, your past, and then these last 5 bullets. Everything has to do with other people, and you cannot control their opinions, their thoughts, their emotions, their actions, or their decisions. Now, we as human animals want to influence them. We want to create a certain outcome for us because we have certain expectations. But the reality is we cannot help these people. We cannot do any of this work for them. So even if you're going through adversity right now, or even if you know somebody who's going through hardship, you cannot do the work for them. You cannot. They have to decide to do this on their own. And we can lead by example. And that's the best way to do it. Trying to get on a high horse and talk down to somebody or tell people that this is what you should do. Most people are not in a place to want to hear that, especially if they're not through the first 5 stages of grief and to the point of acceptance. They say you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And that's true, but it's not your job to make a horse drink. It's your job to make the horse thirsty. And the way you make it thirsty is by leading by example, by giving these little pieces of information, them seeing that you're living your life by these ideals. And if you can do that, eventually those seeds are planted. And if you plant enough seeds, eventually they get watered. And eventually that person starts to come up with this idea almost on their own, and they begin to take ownership. And that's when their life changes. Now, adversity is an inevitability. It never goes away. Adversity shows up unannounced at the most inopportune times without apology. It couldn't care less about what you want. It doesn't give a damn about your feelings. And adversity doesn't take no for an answer. And that is the reality. Even in the 20th century, this is a list of adversities, and there's a bunch more, but I just want to show you. At the beginning of the century, panic recession, bank failures, 1910 to 1919, World War I, the Spanish flu, 29 to 39, Wall Street crash, Great Depression, 41, Pearl Harbor, World War II, the Korean War, Vietnam War, HIV, AIDS, Black Monday. After this, the Gulf War. After that, the beginning of all these other things that happened in the 2000s. But I want you to look at the pattern here. From 1907 to 1910, or from 1901 to 1919, from 19 to 29, from 39 to 40, there is about a 5 to 7 year gap between adversities when we have these areas, these gaps, to start to learn, to get better, to get stronger. So understand that adversity is always here. It's ever present. This too shall pass. What we're going through right now is not unique to us. And I'm not saying that to try to say that this is not a big deal, because for many of us, this is the most difficult thing we've ever gone through. I have an 18-year-old stepdaughter, okay? And I love her with all my heart. For her, her senior year wiped out. Senior prom, you've been thinking about it your whole life? Sorry, kid, you don't get one. Oh, graduation, we'll do something on Facebook. Lame. The idea was she got all these things taken away from her. And frankly, by the time they were doing all these other things, she was already over it. She's ready to go to school. She's ready to move forward. She's ready to be a freshman. But even now, when she's at school, at her college, there's still all these things that are around this, all these fears, all these ideas. So her normalcy is not real. But I'll tell you this much. She has an incredible story that she can tell friends, family, her own kids, her grandkids. If you tell anybody that you graduated in 2020, whether it be from college or whether it be from high school, they will be like, oh, God. But she doesn't look at it as something that's bad. Frankly, this was an opportunity for us as a family to get closer. This was an opportunity because you have to have dinner together every night. You have to have close proximity. All those things that had been a problem before, this is your opportunity to clean the slate. So if something is aggravating about you, something that pisses you off about somebody, this is your time to do it. And I'm not saying that you have to bang heads right now, but I'm saying that by understanding that we are all in this together, adversity will bind us if you allow it to do so. So seeing adversity the way that we're looking at it right now is the key. If I give you one tool or one tactic, you get one tool or one tactic. But if I teach you a concept, I give you 1,000 techniques. And that's what this idea of adversity being a gift is about. These things are natural. These things are like gravity, and it doesn't care about our opinion. This is why it's so important to have this mentality that adversity is an opportunity affixed before we go into battle. Because if we wait until the heat of it, it's going to be too late for many of us. If you don't know who Viktor Frankl is, shame on you. You need to be reading his book. This is from Man's Search for Meaning. And he says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. If you listen to nothing else that I say here today, this is the thing to take away from it. This is the cognitive reframe. And this is not new. This has been around for centuries. It's found in Taoism, Zen, it's found in Buddhism, Stoicism, Viktor Frankl, modern Stoics. People today, entrepreneurs use this all the time. Entrepreneurs love mental resilience because they understand how brutal being an entrepreneur and owning your own business can be. The ups and downs. I'm a genius. I'm going to go broke. I love my life. I can't make it to the next day. That's where this is. But by having a cognitive reframe and having this idea that adversity is opportunity, it will be something that we can keep sustainable and keep us from having these highs and lows, from plummeting through that. The premise of this is that an event has no inherent meaning. There's no emotion in it whatsoever. If you drop your phone, there's no emotion with that. The event itself is completely neutral. It means nothing until we attach a meaning to that. Events have no meaning. They're neutral. The only meaning that they have are the ones that we attach to them. This is what happens. There is a stimulus on this side. Something happens. There's an event. Between that stimulus and our response, as Frankl would say, I call it a gap. Within that gap is the time that we start to decide, what did that event mean? That's the meaning that we give it. So there's the stimulus, there is the meaning that we attach to it, and then there's the emotion that that meaning, our interpretation, there's the emotion that that evokes from us. stimuli, the meaning that we give to it, and the emotion that that evokes, which leads to actions. This is a story from my book, The Gift of Adversity, and this is when I lived in Kansas City. I'm walking to the bank. It's very, very cold outside. It's snowing. I have on my cap. I have on a scarf. I'm walking to the door. As I walk to the door, through the reflection of the glass, I start to open it. I see that there's somebody behind me and a coach bundled up as well, and I go to open the door. I open the door, and it turns out she's a woman, takes her scarf off, and she looks at me, and she looks at the door. And she looks at me, and she looks at the door. And then she looks at me, and she has this look on her face like she smells something that is just hideous, and that she's listened to the most offensive, blasphemous statement in her life. She looks at me and she says, "Do you know that when you open the door for me that you take my power?" I'm flabbergasted. I'm holding the door and my mouth is just on the ground. And I'm just like, what? And she says, "Would you have opened the door for me if I were a man?" And I said, "Frankly, I was opening the door for you just because I was trying to be courteous. I didn't know if you were a man or woman because of the way you were bundled up." And she's like, "Well, I wouldn't have opened the door for you." And that's when I realized, and that's what I said to her. I said, "Well, I guess our ideas of common courtesy are different." I walk through the door closes completely. There is a second set of doors. She waits outside in the cold to make a statement to let the second door shut before she walks to the bank tellers. So I go forward. She waits for me to go all the way in before she walks in because she wanted to make sure that I knew how offended she was. I go through, I make my deposit, and I leave. I don't make eye contact with her again, and I am livid. I am pissed. How dare she do that to me? But as I drove, eventually I started learning. I started thinking about it. My ego had been damaged because I felt good trying to open the door for somebody. But then I used a little bit of empathy. I used a little bit of compassion. And I thought, man, what must have happened to that person to where they felt so threatened by something as simple and courteous as opening a door? The reality was that was not an open door to her. That door may have meant a threat. Maybe because I don't know what was going on in her life. I don't know what trauma she's had. I don't know what baggage she's had. I don't know if she might have had somebody open a door for her and then got mugged. Maybe I look like somebody that had victimized her in the past. Maybe in her mind, it was this grandiose gesture and I was trying to be misogynistic and take her power from her, which honestly, from my side, that was not what I was trying to do. But she does not know that. Again, what was it? It was a stimulus. Stimulus for me was I opened the door and I smiled and I said, "Good morning." The stimulus to her, the meaning that she gave it, was that I was trying to take her power from her. I was trying to turn her into a victim. And as you can see, the emotions are very different. So it's not about you, it's about the other person. And understand that. And this, again, is where adversity can bind us, where we can see that there are opportunities within that. Some immediate action items for you. Identify in your life where you have in the past or you are currently attempting to control something that is out of your control. And we as human beings like to try to do this. Here's the second part. Identify the things in your life that you want to believe out of your control because you just said, "Oh, I'm a victim," and now understand that they are within your control, and then begin to start acting on them immediately. This is your opportunity to change that. So after lying in a bed for 3 months, I eventually had an epiphany. I was angry, I was livid, and I finally realized that all the anger wasn't serving me at all. In fact, it was inhibiting my ability to move forward. And I knew that I had to do something to counteract all of this anger that I was feeling. For most people, the opposite of anger is love. But for me, where I was at in my place, there wasn't a lot of love around me. But I had to find something else that was rooted in love. And the thing that I found was unconditional 360 gratitude. Yeah, adversity guy. I know all about gratitude. I've heard about it. I've got the journal. I write about it. I sit every morning and I think about it. And I brush my teeth and I think about it. It's a buzzword, I get it. But just hear me out. Here's the reality. It's very easy to be grateful when everything is going well in your life. When you have money, when you're healthy, when your family's healthy, when you're happy, when you feel fulfilled. You can be philosophical about somebody else's pain because you're in such a great place. Of course you're grateful. But when the shoe's on the other foot and adversity comes to call, it's different, right? It's very different when it's your turn to face it. And the reality is, as human beings, we are designed, we don't want to have to face it. We want to be the exception to the rule. But that's not how gravity works. That's not how adversity works. That's not how life works. The reality is we have to learn to find gratitude in the times that we most don't want to find it. So what could a 40-year-old paraplegic veteran find to be grateful for when he's lying in the bed unable to move? Not much. But what I did was I took that concept I talked about before. I use this idea as Zen. In Zen, they say, take yourself out of the equation because it's not about you. So for months, I was going through this mentally, thinking to myself, well, what's something I could gain from this? There was nothing. Here's what I had to do. I had to ask myself, okay, right now where I am, did anybody gain something? Did anybody benefit from me being injured? And of course I was like, no, but then I thought about it. If we'd have been in Afghanistan when this happened, because I believe this injury would have happened irrespective of where I was in the world. If we'd have been in Ambush Alley in Afghanistan on deployment and I'd have been injured, in combat, for every one man that is injured, it takes 2 men to pull him to safety. That means my team would have been compromised. That means my squad would have been compromised because they would have had to come and cover down to protect us. That means other people would have had to come in. That means they would have had to fly a Chinook helicopter into a hot zone to come get me. When I looked at it like that, I was able to look and say there were probably 40 or 50 other people whose lives would have been put in harm's danger had I suffered that injury in Afghanistan. And I remember this like it was yesterday, and I remember thinking to myself, wow, I'm lucky. And the words came out of my mouth. And I remember thinking to myself, where did that come from? It's almost like I wasn't saying it. And for the first time in my life, I had that genuine, unconditional 360 gratitude. Because there was nothing in it for me, so to speak, yet had other people been injured when this happened, how horrible would I have felt about that? The reason why gratitude is so powerful is because it is rooted in the same thing as love. That's where it comes from. So if you think about somebody that you love unconditionally, even if they make you mad, whether it be a loved one or a child or a close friend, you may have a little spat, but you still love them. You don't like them, but you love them, right? Gratitude's the same way. You have to have, like unconditional love, this unconditional gratitude for everything that happens in your life, both the good or the bad. Because if you can start to have the same amount of gratitude and unconditional 360 gratitude for winning the lottery as you are for the person that cut you off in traffic, that's when you become bulletproof. Because now, no matter what happens in your life, there's an opportunity. The good things will encourage your behavior, while perhaps the not so good things will be an opportunity for you to see your weaknesses. Adversity shines a light on the things that we need to get better at, and we don't like it. It's tough for our ego. We don't like being checked. We don't like being corrected. But in this life, here's what happens. Adversity will continue to give you the same lessons over and over until you figure it out. And guess what? If you don't figure it out, that's about as far as you're going to develop. You'll be stunted. You'll be stuck. I'm trying to tell you that if you can embrace adversity and look at the opportunity within it, the things that you never would have seen other than having that hardship, those are your chances to look outside of it and to get bigger, to get stronger from it. The way that we look at the perception of adversity is big as well. So from a person at the very top, they see hardship. They see adversity as something that is difficult. If they see adversity as something that is difficult, they'll feel disempowered. They'll go into that place of victimhood, victim mentality. They'll become weakened and they'll be fearful. And now when the cycle starts again, whenever adversity enters the cycle again, they'll go back to this idea that this is hardship. This is disempowering. I don't want to do this. This is stupid. This sucks. I hate this. They get weakened. They have this internal dialogue that is disempowering. They go back into fear. And that loop gets reinforced. Loops within loops, cycles within cycles. However, if you see adversity as opportunity, if you say, wow, this is a chance for me to get stronger, to be empowered. Yeah, this sucks, but this is how I'm going to get better. Now you become emboldened. Now you get stronger. And now you eventually become grateful for this hardship. You become grateful for adversity because that is your opportunity to grow, to get stronger, to see the things that you normally wouldn't want to look at, to see the chinks in your armor, as it were, the weak link in your chain. So how do we get stronger? Micro adversities. I've had people that will say things to me like, well, I haven't gone through the hardship that you have gone through. And again, adversity is not a competition, and that's fine. But a lot of people are stuck in this adversity that they don't even realize. And it's the one that I was stuck in before my injury. And it was the idea of mediocrity. Because mediocrity is a slow killer. It will allow you to stay contented and pacified. And if you stay in that place, you'll eventually start making the same decisions as the people around you that you surround yourself with. You start having the same ideas, the same methodologies, the same political views. You watch the same sports, the same shows, drink the same beer, eat the same food. And then guess what? Those are the kind of people that you will start dating, potentially getting married to, creating a family with. Those are the jobs that you'll have. You have to understand that the people that are around you are important, and they always say, oh, you're the average of the 5 people that are around you. That's not true. You're the average of the emotions that the 5 people around you evoke within you the most often. What does that mean? That means if you're around a bunch of people that are pessimistic, that act like victims, that hate Monday and live for Friday, that complain about everything, and that they are miserable no matter what happens, those emotions are going to be in you, and they will be at the very top of your drop-down menu mentally. That's what you go to. That becomes your default. But have you ever heard if you go to the winner's table that the conversation's different? Yeah, it is. If you're around people that feel like they can do anything, if you're around entrepreneurs that are changing the world, if you're around athletes, if you're reading things about people that have gone through and completely revolutionized an entire industry, all of a sudden you start thinking, wow, well, they were no different than I was. They're just a human. I'm human. What stopped me from doing something great? And that's the way that we have to look at it. The way that we can get stronger is I hope that nothing horrible befalls any of you that's listening to my voice right now. I hope there is no injury. I hope that nothing happens to you like it happened to me. But if you can take what I've gone through and take it to a level to where you can apply it to help you or somebody else, then I've done my job. Micro adversities are the things that can make us stronger. These are small adversities that get us to the next level. Cold showers. Yeah, I know some of you guys, I'm not doing that. Cold showers are crazy. Yeah, they are tough, but they're supposed to be. You get in a shower for 20 seconds and you deep breathe, and then you turn the hot water on, you're like, wow, that sucked, but it wasn't that bad. Usually the anticipation of the hardship, usually the anticipation of the adversity is worse than the adversity itself. Vigorous exercise, again, you're pushing yourself. I don't mean just like taking a simple walk. I mean doing something hard. I mean doing sprints. I mean lifting a heavy weight. I mean trying to go further than you've ever gone before. These small areas where we peak out to allow us to adapt, to change. Meditation, that may not be an adversity for some people, but the first time I tried to meditate, it's like my brain was just going crazy, like a million different things going on. And guess what? Everybody feels like that. For those of you that think meditation is woo-woo, I'll tell you this. Meditation is nothing more than the attempt to focus on your breath, losing that focus, becoming aware that you've lost your focus, and then coming back to your breath. It is a practice. And like all things that require practice, you have to do it over and over again. Basically, anything that forces you to adapt in a positive capacity, that is a micro adversity. These are things that we are voluntarily going out and seeking on our own to get better, to get stronger. We want to use adversity as our compass that tells us where we should be going. And if we're able to do that and embrace it, that's when we're able to get stronger. Immediate action items. Examine your perception of adversity on the perception cycle. And what are some micro adversities that you can use today? Now, for me, the idea is to get us to a place where we can get stronger through everything. Robert Frost said the best way out is always through, and he's absolutely correct. So how do we overcome adversity? By facing it head on. If you try to go around adversity, it can crush you. By trying to avoid adversity, you will never be able to circumvent its grasp. By trying to avoid the struggle, not only will you have to face the same adversity that you would have initially, but now you'll be forced to do so already fatigued from trying to avoid it in the first place. Trying to avoid adversity would be like trying to avoid the tide while swimming in the ocean. But if you can learn to embrace the tide, you will eventually learn to let it lift you up. And you can ride that wave to shore unscathed. And in that moment, if you were able, take a look around. Because the view that you have after you've overcome your adversity is absolutely breathtaking. Adversity is an opportunity. Adversity is a gift. Embrace it. Thank you.
Oh my goodness. I don't want to interrupt, but thank you so much, Marcus, for sharing your story and your message. We have a lot of questions that are coming our way, so I can tell that you've had impact already on our listeners. So
Beautiful.
I want to honor their questions, and we have about 15 minutes to go through them. So I'm going to start with a few, and I just also want to say that please do continue to submit your questions. We'll get to as many as we can in the time that we have.
Absolutely. And right before we get started too, if you reach out to me on social media, if you connect to me on LinkedIn, send me a message, Instagram, wherever, and tell me that you saw this. If there's a message that we didn't get to where this was impactful for you, connect to me in those places, follow me on social media, and that way we can continue the conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for saying it. So I would probably start with this question here, and I'm choosing it, and there are many good questions here because of the troubled times that we are in. So there are many people that are experiencing challenges and adversities. So this person here is asking that I'm troubled by other people's victimhood, as well as my own. And I feel like I'm dealing well with my own adversity, but it's difficult and almost annoying to hear other people's wallowing in their victimhood. So do you have advice on dealing with this right now?
Yeah, that's very common, right? And that's why I talk about that victim mentality. And it's neat because when you're on the outside of it, it's very easy to identify. But when it's us, again, it's hard for us to see it. It's like when you see a bad relationship. You can see a toxic relationship when you're not in it because there's no skin in the game, there's no emotion, there's no fear. But like I said before, it's very difficult to control somebody else. So as much as you can, try to protect yourself from that negative energy, try to create boundaries, and try to just keep doing what you're doing. If you were sitting there being annoyed or allowing this to affect your capacities to do what you need to do, you're kind of wasting energy. So ask yourself right now, is this feeling of disempowerment or this feeling of anger or aggravation about this person, is this going to get me closer to my goals or is it going to get me further away? And if it's not going to get you closer to where you need to go, if it's not going to serve you, then pivot, get rid of that idea. And here's the other part. Don't judge yourself if you do it. Don't judge yourself if you get caught up by it. If this person just gets under your skin, this person won't stop talking about it, that's okay. It happens sometimes to all of us. But again, like meditation, it is a practice to come back to, meditation is to come back to our breath. In this case, it's about coming back to the presence of what we need to be doing. And for us, it's about overcoming adversity, going to that next level, and lifting ourselves to a place where we can help more people. If the person that's around you that's continually bringing you down, if they're not receptive to this, that's okay. Maybe they will be in a couple of years. Maybe they won't ever be, but you cannot control them. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Marcus. I think so. I think it does. So I'm going to change a little bit here now, and I always try to choose questions that are able to answer more than one question, since we're getting so many of them. But I think this question is coming certainly for a guy's perspective. So
Okay.
can I help you give you the context here? And it has to do with being able to put ego aside, to take a true introspective look at your situation. And it may be harder for somebody who has more of a challenge to get in touch with their emotions.
So the question is, how do we get into our emotions and
How
get
do
the ego
you
out of the way?
And how do you put your ego aside to take a true introspective look at your situation, to
Yeah,
get in touch with the emotions?
yeah, ego is everything. It's so difficult for many of us. For me, doing martial arts for my entire life, you get your ego checked every single day. But if you want to see if your ego is the thing that's actually running you, try to disengage and try to look at your what's going on from you from a third person perspective. Trying to look at it from a high view and ask yourself, if my friend was in the same situation that I'm in right now, would I be telling them, you're being egotistical about that? With the woman, when I opened the door for her, that was my ego. So most of the time, whenever we feel offended or we feel angry about something, lots of times it's when we have to check our ego and say, is that true, or is that my interpretation of it? Do I feel threatened by that because maybe I don't feel like a man, or maybe I don't feel strong, or maybe I feel like I've been disrespected? But the reality is, if we're strong and if we're resilient, it doesn't matter what anybody else's opinion is. And again, it's easy to say that, but the idea is to focus on what you can control, which in this case is to step back and say, is this my ego talking, or is this real? And if we can look back on it and step away from it and take our emotion out of it, that's the goal. That's what I'm trying to get people to do. Here's what you have to remember, always. Remember this. Emotions assassinate the truth. If you can take your emotion out of it, especially when things are heated, that's when you can actually see if it's your ego. And now you can look at what's actually going on and not what's your interpretation of what's going on.
Okay. Thank you so much. I also want to make sure that I pass along in front of everybody here right now the thanks that are coming from all our participants, and people also want to express thank you for your service and thank you for sharing your story with us. Would you be able to comment more on your meditation practice and how you find it helpful, please?
There's lots of different kinds of meditation. And frankly, for some people, like I said, some people, if you say meditation, they turn off. But if I say just go for a long walk without any music or without your phone, all of a sudden that's moving meditation for them. That becomes something that is a form of just mindfulness. For me, the meditation that I do is very simple. I do different kinds, but the one that I've been just doing most recently is just Zazen. I just sit, legs crossed, nothing going on, eyes closed, dark room, and just sit relaxed on a couch. And I just kind of let the muddiness of my thoughts settle. And I have no intention, I have no desire. I just kind of let everything go away. As the thoughts come in, I just let them go out, and I don't try to sit there and dwell on anything. In Zen, they say that thoughts are like visitors, and the only ones that stay are the ones that you stop and give tea to. So in other words, the ones that you give attention to are the ones that you'll focus on. Just kind of let that stuff go as best you can. Another kind of meditation that I do, Dr. Joe Dispenza, if you're not familiar with him, incredible doctor, incredible chiropractor, incredible work. He has some guided meditations. There's an AM and a PM meditation. I think you can get them on Amazon as well. And those are guided meditations. So if you're having a hard time keeping your mind quiet, that gives you something to focus towards, and then that gives you something to really focus your energy on. And that's the beginning. Those are the stepping stones to help you get to the next level. And when you start doing that, you'll find that gap between stimulus and response gets bigger. Your bandwidth gets bigger. Your flow states, whenever you're being creative, get larger. It helps stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system. It gives you a better vagal tone and all these other great things they talk about in science.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. This is a great resource going forward. How do you handle the almost physical pain of being in the loop of anger and depression?
The biggest part for so many of us is that we're trying to act like it's not there. We don't want to look at what's going on. We're not accepting it. The information that you're seeking is found in the adversity that you are avoiding right now. If you're having trouble with your business and you're like, I don't know why I can't get customers, but you won't make phone calls or send emails, that might be the problem. If you're mad at somebody because you feel like they did something that's been under your skin for a long time, but you don't have the courage to talk to them or to try to open the dialogue, that's the problem. And again, the pain, the anger of this is very difficult. Understand that you can control that. Understand that you don't have to control it all right now, but you have to make the decision that anger is not serving you. It's actually inhibiting you. And I'm going to talk about this because this is a little bit pivotal for people. There isn't a reason why you have every emotion in your body that you do. It's not by accident. But you have to understand that anger is something that will become corrosive, and you should only be using it maybe 20% of the time in your life. You should be using it to push through hardship when you have to do it. You should be doing it to survive. You should be doing it whenever you absolutely have to have it in like an emergency situation. But the other 80% of the time, you should be trying to be grateful, use empathy. And empathy for ourselves is the hardest part. The internal dialogue and the relationship that you have with yourself. Here's what you have to remember. The way that you talk to yourself, the dialogue that you have with yourself, that internal dialogue will eventually be given to the people around you. So if you're telling yourself a bunch of lies, or if you're calling yourself a bunch of names because you feel weak or you've kind of fallen off the path for a second, that's not going to serve you. And if you've ever lashed out in anger at somebody and said something that was just brutal, and that person's just looking at you and you're looking like, I can't believe I said that. That's because your internal dialogue is not being kept in check. That's why it's so important for us to look at these things very objectively. And here's the other part too. When you're going through hardship, experience the entire emotion. If you lost somebody, experience the emotion. It's not weak to cry. It's not weak to feel badly. It's not weak to miss them. It's weak to try to act like those are not weaknesses. And that's what we have to do. And if you can embrace it for what it is and take all the emotion and judgment out of it, that's how you move forward.
Yeah, thank you. This is a great answer. And I would also then segue into the other question I feel could be connected to this one is some of us are parents, we have children, and everybody seems to be in a situation where you're trying to help each other as much as can, and children are for sure affected as well. So how do you teach children to be resilient, and how do you help them? This is a tough question, and I'm a parent, so I'm listening. But yeah, how do you help them overcome adversity?
The first thing you do is you make sure that they feel safe. You give them, an analogy would be, you give them an incredibly padded room, and then you step back and let them fall. Let them realize that they're not made out of porcelain, that they're not going to break, that they're a little bit tougher than they think they are. Let them stand up, wipe themselves off, and then get back up. And this is a great way that you can use micro adversities. Asking them to do things physical, that in and of itself is good. There's something else you can do with kids. If they're feeling something, ask them to identify the emotion. I feel angry. I feel helpless. I feel tired. I feel bored. I feel frustrated. Whenever they're able to do that, now, again, that takes them out of the emotion and that makes them step back and look at it objectively. And now you can say, okay, you feel frustrated. What does it feel like in your body right now? Where do you feel it? In your chest, in your stomach, in your head? And now we're having this discussion. And now they can understand that these emotions are normal. They're going to have them their entire lives to one degree or another. And this gives them a healthy relationship with those things. So just like, and what else are you building? Communication, trust, love, empathy. You're building a stronger bond with that child, and you're making them stronger. And by making them stronger, you're making the world a better place.
Thank you. Thanks, Marcus. We only have a couple minutes left, so I think one question maybe. This is a question that I have seen in different versions. So let me ask you: does faith play a role in fighting adversity? And you've touched on different religions from time to time. So I want to honor this question.
Of course, and faith absolutely does. And whatever your idea of faith can be, that. If you have something that's rooted in the faith, then by all means believe in that. For me, I didn't really think about faith so much. I thought, I'm the one that got myself in this. I'm going to be the one that gets myself out of this. But here's the other part. Nothing builds faith and nothing breeds confidence like preparation. So if you just want to sit and put your fingers in your ears and act like everything's great and not do the work, you're going to be stuck like that for a long time. But if faith is something that is powerful for you, if it's a mantra, if it's a prayer, if it's an ideology, if it's a belief system, believe in that. And I've heard a lot of people say that when everything's out of your control, pray. And when everything's going well, pray. So whether that be meditation, whether that be a prayer, whether that going to church, whether that be fellowship, by all means, embrace those things. If you believe that it makes you stronger, it absolutely will. And if you believe it doesn't, guess what? It won't either. So embrace your faith, whatever that may be. And just try to accept truth irrespective of source. I know that we're going over time, but if I say religion, a lot of people will shut something down. If I say it's from Islam, or if it's Baptist, or if I say it's Taoist, people will put up a wall because they have an opinion about that. But if you can absorb the truth irrespective of source and just say, this makes sense to me, and I don't care about the ideology that may or may not be attached to it, or the person that may have said it, because here's the reality. With truth, again, it doesn't care about your opinion. So if I absorb a truth and I learn something from somebody, even if I don't like them, but it's something that can help my child be more resilient, who loses out if I'm not able to put my ego aside and absorb that truth? I do, my child does, and the world around me does. So try to absorb truth irrespective of source. If faith is something that is powerful in your life, by all means reinvest in it. And if it's not, maybe explore that. And this is a great opportunity to do it.
Thank you, Marcus. And I think this is a wonderful thought to end up on and to close up our webinar today, which was truly powerful. And I want to thank you again for your time, for sharing your message and your story with us. I do hope that listeners are going to walk away richer with understanding and equipped to find ways to deal with their own adversities as well. I do want to let you know that the recording will be available tomorrow. This requires reflection, so please do go back and go over it again. So the slides will be there, the content will be there, how to get in touch, how to view your podcast, or maybe read your book. All the information will be there as well. So thank you again, everybody. Thank you so much, Marcus. I hope everyone stays great and has a great rest of the week. And we'll see you soon. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Thank you.